Welcome to Music Production Ear Training Exercise number 9 video, Rhythmic Anomalies and the Myth of the Human Feel. Now, the human feel is a subject that I hear a lot about. Thankfully for myself, I grew up as a prodigy drummer as a little kid, and then I became a studio drummer. And as time went on, I was doing more and more research into music production and recording, and then editing and mixing and mastering. And I find this thing, and I still find it to this day, where I hear conversations and I watch people mixing, and they say, I'm going to give a human feel to this track. And I said, well, what are you going to do to it? And they said, well, I'm going to actually, I'm either going to leave it alone because like the drums, this is maybe sometimes with live drummer played. The drummer didn't really play, really on the click, and I'm just going to leave it because it's much more real. It's a human feel. I said, I got it. Or they say, I have this thing totally quantized, this MIDI track. It's totally quantized, and I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to make it a little bit not quantized. And the drums are going to have a human feel. And I'm thinking to myself, what human are they talking about? Are they talking about the human as in the teenage kid down the street in his garage who's playing drums for 6 months? Or are they talking about the human, which is the human I'm talking about, who's a studio drummer who has spent his whole life practicing so that he can play on the click, on the grid? And where his feel comes in is not in altered accuracy of rhythm, which is what the perception usually is, and this is the myth. It is in the altered dynamics. So it's the velocity that he hits his drums or cymbals, the loudness of each hit. And you can create phrasing from that loudness. You can create crescendos, gradually louder, or decrescendos, gradually softer. You can hit even like the kick drum harder and softer at times instead of having it quantized in terms of velocity. Okay? So I will quantize 100% my drums, whether I am editing live drums, which you'll see here in a minute, or whether I'm dealing with MIDI. Now you'll say, well, won't that sound mechanical? That sounds mechanical. That's not a human feel. No. A track, a recording of various instruments is the composite perception. It's the entire perception of everything together. So if you have 8, 9, 10 instruments playing, and you keep the drums right on the grid, and you take the other instruments and you play with those a little bit if you want a human feel, now you're getting something that approximates like pro musicians and a professional product. So there's 2 things about this. One, if you're going to be submitting tracks for licensing, they go to a music editor. The music editor will often create loops. He'll edit things. He'll have to chop things up. If you don't have your drums on the grid, you won't be hearing from that company very much in terms of getting more music licensed. Now, this isn't 100% of the time. I'll show you the exception. But most of the time, you'll want your drums quantized on the grid. Where you don't, even with licensing, and this happens, they'll ask for 60s era rock. In fact, they're asking for specific like original tracks from bands these days. For some like TV licensing opportunities and even films. But it's rare. But still, there's the exception. Even if they're not asking for the original tracks, they will ask for like garage band sounding things or raw sounding things or organic sounding things. They'll use these terms. And it means kind of a loose band, especially like retro rock or 60s rock or psychedelic rock, or any kind of rock. You'll get this request sometimes for, a more raw, loose feel. And there the drums can be like that. But that's the exception. That's not so often that you'll get that kind of a licensing request. But do know that it exists. So those are the 2 scenarios. So you either want things on the grid, which is most of the time. In fact, I always do it, unless I'm asked for this exception for licensing where they want a loose track. So those are your 2 scenarios. And the one that I suggest that you use more often is the on-the-grid drums. So I found something. I was going through tracks in my vault, and I found something from a few years ago. And let's take a listen to this. These are live drums. These are drums that I laid down. I was asked to do a presentation for the Electronic Music Producers Association, California. And what I did was I was showing them how to put together a hybrid track with real drums and some synths. And so I sat down behind the drums. You'll actually see somebody took a cell phone video of this. I'm going to show it to you here while we're listening. So what I did was I sat down at the drums and I laid down a track. I was composing from the drums. I'll do this often. So I just did one take. I said, just roll the tape. And so I started playing and I was writing a song in my head. And so I got to the end of it and I said, you know what, I'm just going to use that. It was just like, it was an idea. I wasn't really ready to lay down anything. I just wanted to hear it back for the idea. So this is it. This was the one take I did on drums. And I'm going to play the click along with it. And I want you to listen for rhythmic anomalies, meaning anything that's not on the grid. All right, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to let the cursor move along with this track so you can watch and you can look at the grid and see where this track ended up on each beat. Okay, here we go. We rolling? Yeah. Okay, now this is one area of mixing where you can use your eyes, by the way. I mean, it does help while you're quantizing to see if your work is being done correctly. Like for instance, let's find something that's off here. I think right after this triplet fill, I got a little bit off. So this beat right here, that you see right in here, should be there. It's a little early, so the beat came a little early. This one, just a hair late. Okay, like this one was right on, 63. So, some of it was good, and some of it was a little bit loose. And this ear training exercise, I'll have this file for you to listen to, with the click in it, is to be able to put a click up and listen to a rhythm track, especially drums or anything like that, your foundation, and determine if it's really on the groove, on the grid, okay, and lined up. Now, where it becomes robotic and where it becomes negative to have something on the grid is if the dynamics are all the same. Like if I played all these notes the same volume, but you'll see they get a little louder, a little softer here. Same on this fill coming up here. Like over here, starts out soft, louder, a little softer. So those dynamics are what give the human feel. That's where you should get your human feel from. So let's listen to the finished product, and I'm going to play this one with the click, and you can hear the difference, because there's guitars and all kinds of stuff on this thing. There's orchestration. But you'll be able to hear the fact that the drums are solidly on the groove, and then things can breathe and move around it, such as guitars, even bass a little bit. Although bass should be locked in, tightly with drums, I suggest. So here you'll hear the drums very tight on the grid with this finished track, and the bass also I suggest being tight. And then you can make the human feel occur with the strings, with the guitars, with some synths or other things, and you can make them breathe a little bit. And that'll make the perception that you have the human feel. But underneath it all, let's say you're a music editor and you want to get this thing, because we're talking about a lucrative home studio. You want to make some money? Get it licensed. You want to get it licensed? Make sure that the editor can actually edit it and create loops if he needs to out of it, or extend it or shorten it. And he's going to do it right on the downbeat of your drums, of your rhythm tracks. Okay, so let's take a listen to this finished product here. There you go. And I call that track Fundamental Groove. And that track actually has been licensed quite a few times, and it's been edited. So I think, and that same client has come back to me for plenty of licensing gigs. So it paid off. So there's the proof is in the pudding. So this music production ear training exercise basically involves this. It's being able to perceive and listen for any rhythmic anomalies, especially in drums, bass, rhythm, the foundation of your track. And unless you're doing a totally artistic presentation, like an artistic album for a client or your own, and you're not even thinking about licensing or anything, or you're being asked for something that's raw, organic, then this is not even a factor. You don't even need a click necessarily on some of those things. But when you're going to create a product that's going to go to market, going to go to licensing or potentially, I suggest strongly put it on the grid, make sure the band or the producer or the artist, even if it's all in the box, make sure you're playing on the grid, make sure you got the click up, and make sure you're quantizing the foundation of your track. And if you want the human feel, then put it in other instruments. Okay? All right, good luck.